Moadim l'simcha is what we say today on my little horse. Please excuse that, because this teaching that I've learned is one of the most beautiful teachings ever that I've learned from the Rebbe or anywhere. And it encompasses various different beautiful teachings. And I hope that I will be able to deliver it appropriately. So we're now nearing the end of Sukkot. We're in the time of Simchas Beis HaShoeva, a time of rejoicing. Sukkot itself is all about rejoicing, and during these days, in the times of the temple, and now everywhere in the world, we rejoice. The Rebbe says that the rejoicing starts from Yom Tov, and part of the rejoicing is the unity, the mitzvah of the four kinds, of the taking together of the Lulav, the Esrog, Hadassim, and the Aravos, each one representing a different kind of person, represented by the taste and the smell. So the taste represents a person who excels in Torah study, who digests information. A good smell, a good scent represents a person who excels in good deeds, helping others and making this world a better place. So taste and smell are the famous teachings that are represented from the Midrash. An esrog has both taste and smell. It represents a person of perfection, a person who excels in both Torah study and in good deeds. The hadas, the myrtle, has good smell, represents a person who excels in good deeds. The lulav, the tall, has a good taste because it comes from a date palm tree and represents somebody who excels in Torah study. The bottom of the barrel, the arava, the willow, has neither taste nor smell, has seemingly no redeeming factors, doesn't excel in anything good, not in academics, not in good deeds. And that is the beauty of the mitzvah, is that we take all four kinds, and all four kinds together create what we call a tzibur. A tzibur is a congregation. A congregation consists of the Hebrew word tzibur, tzadik bet resh, tzadikim, beinonim, and rishaim. The righteous, the regular people, and the wicked. We're all in this together. The Rebbe says that the joy of Simchas Beis HaShoeva, of the Sukkot experience, starts with this idea of unity, that we're all united in this mitzvah, that we take all four kinds, bind them together, we wrap them together, we bless, we shake, and we bring them to our heart. Says the Rebbe, based on the Hasidic teachings, bringing it to your heart. V'hashevota el levavecha, you bring it to your heart. When you bring it to your heart, the heart distributes it to the rest of the body. You bring it to your heart so that it stays with you. And this is what we're doing now in the last days of Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret. Atzeret means to stop and to gather and to absorb. The Hasidic perspective of Shmini Atzeret says that we're absorbing that which we accumulated throughout the month of Tishrei. In such high spiritual experiences, and now we're absorbing it, internalizing it into pnimius, into our inner self, and we keep it for the rest of the year, and slowly we unpack the spiritual energy all year round, extended release all year. Throughout the year, we slowly extend the release of the spirit that we gathered during this holiday. Now that is the generic stuff. Now we're going to go to a little bit of a deep dive into the most beautiful teaching ever. This is one of them for sure. It starts off with a halachic premise. The Torah tells us that we should take for ourselves a set of 4 kinds for this mitzvah. The lulav, esrog, hadassim, and aravos. And that we do. The Jewish law tells us that if we add an additional one, like an esrog or a lulav, then we transgress a prohibition of Bal Tosif. Bal Tosif means do not add. Do not add what the Torah tells you to do, and do not subtract. And if we add one additional esrog or lulav, or we put more aravot, more than the 2 that we need, then, then we transgress the prohibition of Bal Tosif. That's the halacha, Jewish law. The question arises, and is asked by many biblical commentators, why is it that if we add just one of the set, it is not considered, it's considered adding, and we transgress this prohibition? Do we not look at the mitzvah of the 4 kinds as if they are one composite? There's one set. Only when you take all 4 together does it turn into a mitzvah. If you're missing any of them, it's not the mitzvah. The Rebbe asks and repeats many people's questions. It should be the case that only if you add a complete additional set, then you transgress the prohibition of do not add. But if you're just going to add one, like the lulav, or one more esrog, then they're not mitzvos. They're not independent mitzvos. They're just a part of a mitzvah. Why would it be considered Bal Tosif that you're not allowed to add onto the mitzvos if you add only one of the 4 kinds? This rule of Bal Tosif should only apply if you add a complete set, because the mitzvah is a complete set. That's the question. And here comes the answer. So we're now in the world of the Talmud, the world of Nigla, the world of the revealed Torah study, halacha. So why is it? So the Rebbe brings the famous Gaon, Rabbi Yosef Radin, the Rogachev, is one of the most brilliant geniuses of the former generation, and he is able to split hairs in the halachic dimensions. And he says as follows. He says that for this prohibition, that we cannot add one of the kinds into the set of the 4 kinds, it must be that each of the 4 kinds have their own independent mitzvah value, that they actually have their significance in the world of mitzvos, aside from this composite of 4 that we have together in the mitzvah of the 4 kinds on Sukkot. So the question is, where is there in the world of mitzvos, in the world of Torah, where is there a time where we use any of the other 4 kinds? So, in discussing this with a lot of other people, some people say, oh, for besamim, I use the spices on Havdalah, I take the myrtle leaves. I've been doing that for years. That's wonderful, but that's not a tradition. That's my mishugas. I like to do that. You might like to do that, but it's not a Jewish law. It's not a Jewish tradition. Where is there a place where we use one of the 4 kinds elsewhere, outside of the Sukkot experience of the 4 kinds? And that's the question. Says the Rogachev that there's one place, there's only one of the 4 kinds, and that is the willow, the arava. The willow, the arava. Tonight, it's Hoshana Rabbah. Tomorrow in Shul, we take 5 willows willow branches and we whip them on the floor as they did in the times of the temple, way back when, the times of the prophets, arguably before the times of the temple. And that's supposed to sweeten the severities, it's supposed to sweeten our judgment. We take 5 willows and we hit them on the ground. So here says the Rogachover, we have a precedent where we have one of the 4 kinds that we use elsewhere outside of this composite of the 4 species, and that's the arava. So now, says the Rebbe, we know that we cannot add an arava, a willow, to the set of the 4 kinds. Otherwise, we'll be transgressing the prohibition of do not add, Baal Tosif. Because we see that the arava, the willow, has its own independent significance aside from this 4 species of Sukkot, because we use it to whip the ground. Wonderful. But here's the next question. What about the other 3? I know that I cannot add a willow to the 4 kinds. I cannot add 3 aravos. Usually I have 2 aravos. Now I say, okay, I can't add a 3rd or a 4th. Otherwise I'll be transgressing the prohibition of Baal Tosif. Do not add. What about the esrog, the lulav, or the hadassim? I know we do add hadassim, so I'm going to leave that aside because I don't know the answer to that. Because we do add a lot of myrtle leaves, hadassim. So now the question is, yeah, Sheila, thanks. Anyway, so now the question is, what about the other 3? The esrog, the lulav, and the hadassim. How do we know that we cannot add, or why are they included in the prohibition of do not add, of Baal Tosif, if they don't have their own independent value in the world of mitzvos? That's the question. Says the Rebbe that the Rogachover goes on to explain something from the Rambam, from Maimonides. And he says that the Maimonides in Mora Nevuchim is the guide for the perplexed. He explains, I don't know the context, but he says that when you have a composite, something that's combined of many or more than one variable or element, and if you're able to separate any one of them and give it its own independent value or find its own independent significance, then you know that the other elements in that composite also share that independent significance, that feature. So if you take out 1 out of 4 that we have here, and we say the arava, the willow, has its own independent significance, says the Rogachover, expounding on the Rambam's teaching, that it means automatically that the esrog and the lulav and the hadassim all have their own independent significance in the world of mitzvos also, because the arava does. So now we know that's why we cannot add another esrog or another lulav or more aravos or hadassim to the mitzvah. So now we have the halachic part down pat. I know it's a little complicated, so I was trying to clarify it in my own mind and say it slowly and clearly. But if you listen to this once or twice, it'll be clear. Now comes the deep, fun, the most beautiful part. Until now, it was just sort of an introduction, because the Torah lives in many dimensions. This dimension we just spoke about was the halachic revealed aspect of the Torah. Now we're going to go into the spiritual, the deeper meaning, which is far more beautiful and far more touching to the heart. Now comes the Rebbe's question. The Rebbe says, I understand that we can't add to the set because of the Arava. We learn independence, independent significance. We learn the existence, the entity of existence of the other three kinds of the Esrog, the Lulav, and the Hadassim. We learn it from the Arava. Ask the Rebbe, wouldn't it make sense for us to learn that something has value from the Esrog, from the top of the line, from a person with perfection, from someone who excels in Torah, excels in good deeds? Doesn't that make sense? Wouldn't it make more sense to say the Esrog, we learn somewhere in the Torah that it has its own individual significance, and because the Esrog has significance, it teaches us about the other ones too. The Esrog is the top man, the top quality human. That should be the teacher for other things. Why is the lower one, the lowly Arava, the teacher? Says the Rebbe, in order to get this, we'll have to dive into a little teaching from the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov taught us that everything in this world has a lesson for us, and especially in the world of Torah. And so too here, the fact that we learn about going back to the human aspect of this. The Esrog represents the top man, top human being. Whoops, my phone is playing tricks on me over here. Let's do this again. Sorry. It's my Gimble. It's electronics. It's great when you know how to use it. The Esrog represents a perfect human being. The Lulav, semi-perfect. The Hadass, semi-perfect. The Arava, completely flawed. A flawed human being. So why do you learn the significance of humanity from the lowest level, from the Arava? That is the question that the Rebbe poses. And the Rebbe says there's a teaching from the Baal Shem Tov about the first time Moshe Rabbeinu met with God. It was at the burning bush. Now everyone knows the story that the bush was on fire and it wasn't being consumed. What kind of bush was it? The Torah tells us, it was a thorn bush, and it was aflame with fire, in a bursting flame of fire. The Midrash talks about this, and the Baal Shem Tov explains, why is it that God spoke to Moshe and appeared to him and revealed himself to him at this lowly thorn bush? Wouldn't a tall cedar tree be more appropriate? Wouldn't something very fruitful and multipliable be much more beautiful? Why a thorn bush? Says the Baal Shem Tov, because only a thorn bush can burn. Only a thorn bush can yearn. Only a thorn bush, one who has nothing, like the Arava, like the willow, can actually yearn for something more. Yearn for a complete yearning for a connection to God. Only someone who's got nothing is truly desires something in that connection to God. Says the Rebbe, if you are an Esrog or a Lulav, you're already accomplished. You have achievements. You're good. Pat yourself on the back or on my beautiful Lulav shirt. Share the love that my wife made for me. If you're already accomplished in some way, then your yearning for God is not complete. And what makes a person complete is their connection to God. That's what makes a person significant and complete, is their connection to God. But somebody who has lots of Torah under their belt and lots of mitzvos in their quiver, I've done so much, I'm so smart. You have some satisfaction from your achievements, naturally, and appropriately even so, says the Rebbe. But you're not yearning for God anywhere close to someone who has no achievements or no knowledge or no Torah study whatsoever. The yearning comes from the lack, comes from the vacuum. Who can truly yearn for God? Someone who doesn't have God or doesn't feel they have God. That's why he says the Baal Shem Tov, and the Rebbe is bringing it down and applying it here, that the burning bush had to be a thorn bush, because only a thorn bush can burn with a flame, with a yearning flame to God. And so too, says the Rebbe, Rebbe applies that teaching here. Which of the four kinds teaches us that a human being has significance, is worthy, has independent value? It's the lowest one. It's the Arava, because the Arava is the only one who truly yearns for God, is truly humble. The Torah says, the verse the Rebbe quoted, Esdaka u'shafal ruach eshkon, I dwell, says God, with the drowned. I dwell, says God, with the downtrodden, with the lowly, with the humble of spirit. And if somebody has so much the esrog, or the lulav, or the hadas, they've got it already. They're not downtrodden. They're not of lowly spirit, naturally. How can they gain significance? How can they gain justifiable existence? If they learn from the Arava. The Arava is somebody who's got nothing. And then when he decides to return to God, he returns wholeheartedly. And he yearns wholeheartedly. And that yearning, only the Arava has. Only the thorn bush has. Only the willow has. Only the one who lacks can have. And says the Rebbe, the only way the esrog, the accomplished Torah scholar and philanthropist, or the lulav, the Torah scholar, or the hadas, the philanthropist, or the good deeder, someone who does a lot of good deeds. The only way they can truly connect with God is if they bind, they unite with the Arava, with the willow, with the lowly willow, who has no taste, no smell, just fire, just a burning desire to be connected to God. And only then, when the other three unite with the lower one, do they actually gain significance in the eyes of God, in the eyes of man. Because then they learn from the contagious humility of the willow, and they gain some humility themselves. And that's the basic idea. I think I covered it all. I'm in this new polo field over here in the metro parks of Cleveland. I just found this yesterday with my wife. We were looking for a place. I'm actually looking for a place that has good reception, that I can create this video without stopping in the middle. And that's the story. I think that's the whole story for today. The Rebbe says so much more, but this is a full, just a 10-minute talk, and I just thought that is so beautiful. That we learn the value of other humans, of the most accomplished, from the most humble, and it spills itself over in the world of Nigla, in the revealed world, like nobody could understand. Why are we learning about the significance of the greater ones from the lower one? Chassidus explains it. Chassidus has the answers. And it's a beautiful answer, and I'd love to have you share this with other people, internalize it. I hope you understood it. And tonight is Hoshana Rabbah. Tomorrow night is Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. We're going to have in mind those who cannot dance. We're going to dance for them. Those who are brutally murdered, and the hostages who hopefully will be released by then. We have another day or two, and we'll dance for them. If not, God forbid, and hopefully we'll all dance together with the coming Mashiach. very soon. God bless you all. Take care.